So welcome back everybody, this is Paul again, and today I thought I'd make another little video here and talk about something that's a really, really important subject. And I don't usually get into these kinds of subjects, but one of the oldest subjects that every single one of us has to deal with is the issue of being sad and having grief in our life. And every human being knows that. Every human being probably on the face of the earth has always at some point experienced some deep sadness. And since it is an old problem, a lot of different sages and people and given their opinions on the subject, and Buddha, of course, was supposedly opened one of his first presentations was life is suffering and life is difficult. And the question of what do you do about it, because, you know, if it's so common, and how can we process it? And along the way, very wise people and people who've been through a lot of suffering have found ways to say, look, you know, one thing that you can do is you can try to use that suffering and that grief to tunnel through into bliss, to tunnel through into some deep wisdom and understanding, to confront it, not to try to avoid it, but to take a really strong look at the reality, the mortality, the transcend nature of just being alive. And in that process of investigating that, by having a deep longing and just crying and praying, and people go through so much, to come to this understanding and the realization that, look, some things we know from the very beginning, no matter how, whether you're born a king or a prince or whatever, sooner or later it's just over. The body's over. You have to accept that as reality. But by using grief and sadness, pleasure won't do this. Pleasure won't bring you. Pleasure can be a great distraction, but great pain and sorrow and grief, because then you lose somebody that you love or something. And it's like, I just can't face it. Like, you can't face, like, well, what about when you lose yourself, when the very end comes, you know? So these mini deaths that happen in our life, these little endings, these permanent, irrevocable endings, force us within. And when you go within with that feeling and let yourself, it's okay to cry, pray, whatever, but somewhere in there there's a light, there's a tunnel of inner consciousness, and that's the miracle, because it is a reality. And the sages that come and teach us, and you know, I've learned, I listen to so many, anywhere I can get inspiration, I listen, because I've experienced a lot of sadness in my life too, you know, at different times. But along the way, I've met some teachers, and one in particular taught me some meditation techniques a long time ago in the early 70s. And he's still out there. And he, you know, people have taught for many, many, many centuries and thousands of years. It's a very simple teaching to know ourselves. And one of the ways that we get to know ourselves is through the sufferings and the longings and the thirst that we experience. And the thirst brings us to a point within where you start to connect and realize what the immortal part of us is. It's not an intellectual thing. That's the unfortunate thing, you know, or the fortunate thing. If it's not intellectual in a logical sense, but it's absolutely logical in the common sense of, look, this reality that we have. I mean, just we have to be honest with ourselves, the limitations of the human brain, and all the minimum things that our perceptions and so on. And we have a short lifetime. For any human being on the face of this earth to stand up and just like think they know everything, I mean, you know, we can know in a flash the most important thing that we need to know is that spark that's within us. And babies know it. That's the whole thing. See, we come from a point when we're little, we come out of this womb, we might be crying at first, but basically, you know, most babies, they're just burbling over with sweetness. Along the way, we get distracted and we get kind of, you know, this thing tastes good, and if you're not tasting that sweet sugar, then you get sad, you cry. And it's just one kind of sweet after another if we don't have the pleasures. But the thing is that there's a pleasure within, and this is what all the great teachers teach. So when we have a deep sorrow in our life, in our private time to go quiet and just follow that all the way in, it's to cry it out, or whatever is necessary to really understand, look, yes, we lose in life, things pass in life, but every single breath is incredible. Every single one. We get so many of them again and again and again and again. We have this incredible existence. And if we take care of our bodies halfway decently, it just kind of heals by itself and everything is wonderful and just going on, and we have so many blessings, and we lose people that we never see again, but we meet new people. And it's a weird thing because in this modern world, people go through so many changes, and they say, well, for example, they might change a marriage, and they swear to God, well, their second marriage is even better than their first one, or their third house was better than the first one that they really loved. And they keep going on and say, well, you know, you have to leave what's behind to get to the better thing. And I was reminded of a dream that I was told a long time ago. And this person said in the dream there was a warehouse just full of all kinds of amazing, amazing things. And she was in there, and there was somebody there, and they asked her, well, what are all these things? And he said, well, these are all the things that people prayed for but didn't wait for, or never prayed for. There's a thirst that develops from facing grief, a real deep hunger to the recognition of life being so dramatically potent every single minute. And there are people who have lived long and so-called happy, content lives with lots of pleasures, but in their whole life they never, ever got it. And that's why some of these great sages taught from the suffering, like Buddha. Buddha was told, his father was told, if this boy ever sees any of the suffering of the world, he will immediately just, you know, renounce it all. And that's what happened. But he saw old age, pains, illness, and death. And he says, well, what can I do about this? It's going to happen to me? Yes, it's going to happen to me. It could happen to you. But there is something mystical, call it whatever you want, grace, anything that people can put a label on. And that's one of the mystery of existence. We don't know very much. It's a huge universe. It's like interpenetrating domains of various frequencies and energies and polarities, and all this stuff is going on. Subtle things that we never realize. We go through our whole life blind and sometimes just unconscious of all the incredible stuff going on. And we understand very little of it. So suffering and grief can actually help transform a life. And there's nothing new that I'm saying here, obviously, but I've listened to some great teachers talk about this. There's some current ones out there, and people, I won't name a lot of names right now, but I listen to a lot of people. And again, you know, these are simple things that some people have had a near-death experience when they're very young, and you know, I've heard so many incredible stories that the near-death experience, the trauma of that experience, actually liberated them, and they were never the same. And the rest of their life, they lived in a totally different frame of mind and with joyfulness and so on. But the transition to understand that we're not these bodies, and sometimes grief and death experiences with other losing people we love shocks us into that realization. But it's a waking up from the slumber of taking life for granted into an awareness of something really, really incredible and joyful. So I think my YouTube limit has run out here, but appreciate all the feedback, and again, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.